Needlepoint, the Record Collector podcast with Paul Lester and Daryl Easlea.
Hi, I'm Paul Lester, editor of Record Collector, Britain's oldest, longest-enduring music monthly.
My name is Daryl Easlea. I too work for Record Collector, and I'm the editor of the Rare Record Price Guide.
And this is our new podcast, Needlepoint, where we look at rock's rich tapestry, as Judy Burchill once called it, through the prism of the latest issue of our magazine.
And what an issue it is. It has got no less than David Gilmour on the cover. And what we do with Needlepoint, this is now in our 7th episode, breaking records by the moment, is we look at it a bit like a record. We spend some time on the main track, if you will, and then we go and look at side 2, and then maybe we look at some bonus material, maybe the free single that was limited to the first 1,000 copies.
Mm. Worth pointing out that unfortunately we don't have as we normally do, the finished copy with us, but we do have a version of the front cover on the iPad. There's a reason for this. What is the reason? It's because we went to press a bit late, or there are various reasons.
The reason is we should do it next week, but you're on holiday and then I'm on holiday. So there it is. For the people that are listening on Spotify and other streaming platforms without audio, Paul is now showing a copy of the latest magazine where you see David,
like Anthea Redfern. Give us a twirl.
David Gilmour's head, which is not dissimilar from Paul Lester's head. For those
actually, you're not wrong. There's worse things to be called. Looking like something.
Well, he's a very handsome man.
He's a good-looking fella,
as is yourself. Yeah, and it's a lovely piece. So yes, that is going to be by the time our podcast is out. Of course, you'll be in the shops. You'll have all seen it. You'll have all held it in your hands. And tell us, Paul, what is in the issue?
Well, there's a lot in the issue. There's a lot of you in the issue, actually. I hasten to add. We'll explain that in a second. But we've got Dave Gilmour on the cover, exclusive interview, talking about his life and career, his life and times via 8 or 9 of his most important gigs, solo and with Pink Floyd. It's just a technique that we've decided to employ because we thought he'd rise to that. It's something he'd never done before. And he certainly did seem to enjoy the stroll down memory lane. I'm trying to think of memory lane in a Floydian sense. Is there a kind of a Floydian lyric that would be suitable for a nostalgic trip?
A lot of Floyd and Arnold Lane, if you will.
There you go, that'll do. A trip down Arnold Lane via several Floyd and solo Gilmour gigs. That's the cover story, and it's over. Is it 14 to 16 pages?
16 pages.
It's a whopper. And what's great about it is you do get a real sense of time spent with Mr. Gilmour. You weren't fobbed off with a 45-minute phone. You met up with him a couple of times, I believe.
Yeah. We had a couple of meetings, and the thing is, whenever you interview, inverted commas, a legend, I'm the 12,000th interviewer that's crossed his path in his time, and I wasn't going to go and ask him. I mean, nothing was off limits, but it's not like, well, tell us about Dark Side of the Moon, David. What was it like in the studio when Sid came in? What was all of that? You can read that everywhere. But what I love is when you talk with David, who's not, he doesn't need the work. Let's be quite honest. And
he's done quite well for himself, hasn't he?
He's done quite well for himself, and he certainly doesn't need to talk to me or anyone. But he does it because he wants to, and he, if it's on his own terms, he enjoys it. So, talking about things like playing backgammon with Graham Nash at Abbey Road, and that's how Graham Nash came to be on the On an Island album. Now, maybe he said that millions of times elsewhere. I haven't read it, and he hasn't said it to me. And I think, actually, that's more interesting than knowing, then Nick came in and played this piece. It's got some texture in it, of course.
And the fact that you've got a little bit of history with him helped, didn't it? Because you did interview him 23 years ago for Record Collector.
I did.
So it allowed you to bring a sort of a sense of not balance, but
Van Morrison was saying? Well, a sense of, what was fascinating when I interviewed him before, it was 2002, and it was the Record Collector interview, and he was only becoming a solo artist again. Pink Floyd had gone and finished with the Division Bell in 1994. And he'd sort of laid quite low in that time. And he'd done these tentative gigs at the Royal Festival Hall. Firstly, he was asked by Robert Wyatt to do The Meltdown, which he talks about in today's feature as well. And he liked it so much he went to do his own show there, and a DVD. You know, when DVDs were the hot new thing, he brought out the DVD of it. So that's what he was sort of promoting. And he hadn't relaunched his solo career. His last solo album was 1984. You know, he didn't. It was like everything was in the rearview mirror. Where now, in that period of time, in that 23 years, you know, Pink Floyd had the Live 8 moment. You know, Pink Floyd have now become this sort of pan-global industry of cosmicness, if you will, that everyone loves. You know, the backstory of the politics of Pink Floyd is well known. But then, you know, he's had 3 solo albums, and he's done, you know, loads of big tours, gone to Pompeii, made these big statement gigs. Rick Wright and Syd Barrett have both died in that time. You know, loads and loads of sort of things have happened. And
So this gave you an opportunity to reflect on all of that.
exactly.
Also, he's done a really good job, I think. I'm not a Pink Floyd expert by any means. I mean, I did bought Dark Side at the age of 12, 13, like everybody else. You know, it had a reasonable impact on my kind of teenage years. But he's done a very good job, I think, of not resurrecting his career, but he started off being the bloke in the shadow of Roger for many, many years, even decades. I always sort of felt that he was dismissed as not as important as him, and now suddenly it's Roger is the one that's ever so slightly in the shadows, and Gilmour is the sort of omnipresent, ubiquitous, all-powerful, dominating Floydian character.
Well, I think it's complex. You know, it's obviously complex, and I think what is fascinating is they both have. You know, David has got this film live at Circus Maximus in Rome coming out, and a quadruple live album. You know, the Luck of the Strange tour, and he did 21 dates. And you know, he goes to towns and people come to him. So it was like the Albert Hall in London, and Hollywood Bowl, and Circus Maximus, and Madison Square Garden, and so people travel to see him. He doesn't, you know, he's done touring. He says about, you know, he's had his years in the bus and all of that, and you know, he's nearly 80. It's like all of these icons. He's nearly 80, and I think when you see him, it's all about the music. Fabulous lights, all of that stuff is in there. You know, back projections. Roger Waters also got his film out, This Is Not a Drill, and that show is, you know, phenomenal as well. But it's all about the show, you know. It's that classic thing. There's so, you know, flying pigs and you know, dressing up and lots of back projections with meaning and things, because you know he's Roger Waters.
But yeah,
So
Roger Waters was the songwriting mainstay for many years. Dave less so. Dave like a mate of mine.
yeah.
But he seemed to have reasserted himself, and now the primacy is shared between
Well,
him and Roger.
I think there was always a feeling, you know, Roger was the ideas man. You know, he was the concept.
Yeah.
And so all of his ideas, and we talk about one of the gigs in the list that David did, was that, you know, you've got these. They were you know, the art band, then they became a pop band all of a sudden with See Emily Play, and then Sid left, and there was like 2 years where they were like skulking in the shadows of trying to do, you know, find their feet really, and the space rock became the thing. And as early as sort of 69, Waters is trying to do this thing where the man and the journey, and one half is about, you know, a day in the life of a human being, and the second part is a journey he takes into the cosmos, sort of thing. So you had things like them boiling kettles on stage and sawing wood and, you know, stuff like that, but in a term of a concept, and which led to Dark Side of the Moon, and then you had Animals based on Animal Farm, and then of course The Wall. So he was bringing those big things, but the tunes in the, you know, were Gilmour and Wright up until Wish You Were Here. You know, it was very much a sort of collective. But, you know, I think people sort of think, and coming back to your point in a very circuitous manner there, Paul, is,
The
you
only
know,
way to travel.
I think people did think, well, because he's just, you know, the great musician, and he didn't really write the lyrics, where Roger had all the concepts. And so when you know, quote, ticking away the hours that make up the moments that make up a dull day and things like that, you know, that's Roger Waters. But then those, you know, the guitar solos and the songs, you know, you think the best Pink Floyd songs like Echoes or Comfortably Numb or whatever, you know, it's Gilmour really involved in the music. And in a way, it's a bit like Lennon and McCartney. It's like that time when McCartney couldn't get arrested, 10, 15 years ago or whatever. I think it's a sort of similar thing. They will always need, the two of them together as far as they are apart. The two, when that was absolutely working, and you had the melody and the words and the collabs, it was brilliant. And the love they create in people. People think they are this, fabulously cosmic turn, and they are.
Britain's second favourite band, you could quite easily argue that it is indeed Pink Floyd. And I was going to talk about the amount that you had in this issue. Huge issue for Daryl Easlea. But Pink Floyd had a great 1979. They had the #1 Christmas single with Another Brick in the Wall. But by sheer coincidence, you've interviewed probably the other big single artist of 1979. That would be Robin Scott of M and pop music fame. #2, wasn't it, in the charts in May 1979? Kept off the top slot by, it wasn't Silly Games by Janet Kay, was it?
That never went to #1.
Well, that was a #2 as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, you had it was kept off, I think, for 4 or 5 weeks. I mean, it was a long-term #2, and when it they do the bestsellers of the year at the end, it was the 5th bestseller, so it outsold many of the #1s. But
so having met Dave Gilmour at length, you then decide to meet at length the artist behind pop music, and it doesn't seem to me, has he done anything in the 46 years since?
Well, he's done a huge amount, and read it in the feature. But he said he wished he'd had a manager in us, because he sort of managed himself, and there were decisions he made which were right for him at the time, and I think he still thinks they were right for him. He's quite happy with his career. He's not an old sort of regretting pop star. But what he did do, he didn't really capitalize on the success. I mean, he was #1 in America. You look at, there's a list of those #1s, and you've got like something like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, Heartache Tonight by the Eagles, M pop music, then Lionel, the Commodores Still, and another one of those huge American records of that time. So he signed to Sire as well, when it was the coolest record label in the known universe.
He was weird, and we didn't probably know it at the time, but it was one of the 2 or 3 intimations from 1979 of the synth pop future to come, probably 2 years down the line. Because there was Flying Lizard's Money, also from 1979, and Buggles' Video Killed the Radio Star, September 79. So these little flickers and glimmers of the Human Leagueness to come. In fact, actually, the Human League ended up having a 1979 single out under a different name, didn't they? The Men, yeah, which was...
Oh, but it's true, I Don't Depend on You.
Yeah, fantastic. And it got absolutely nowhere. And it seemed as though synth pop was just a novelty thing that, we'll try this out. It's not going to really happen. And of course, within 2 years, talking about being big in America with Human League, Soft Cell, and all of them, they called it the second British invasion, didn't they?
Although I want to just come back to M quickly. I do want to say there was a slight inroad, quite a major inroad into electronic music in 1979, which ties in very well with our new record collector bookazine. Gary Newman, of course.
Yeah. Also May, June 79, wasn't it?
Yeah, so you had Tubeway Army at first, and then you had Cars. And everyone that's listening and listening in and watching us, on the bottom there, recordcollectormag.com, you could order our new magazine and our bookazine, which is edited by Rick Flynn, and it's a perfect deep dive, as they say these days, into the world of Gary Newman. And Gary speaks in it himself, and it's all there. But just coming back to pop music, Robin Scott was the only pop star I ever wanted to be. I mean, I loved all the others, and I knew I was never going to be Noddy Holder. I knew I was never going to be Paul McCartney or Bowie, as much as I loved them all. But when Robin Scott came out in that suit, and just looking so, with the mirror shades, with his briefcase, he just looked to me so cool, because it was like this, you could tell he was slightly older, but it was like he had a briefcase of pop. He had a briefcase with a history of pop in it, and he was going
to. It was like an achievable version of the Men Machine, suited android humans that the human the Kraftwerk were. It was almost like he brought it down. Man at CNA meets.
I was going to say
Florian Schneider.
The Moss Bros Florian Schneider, but yes, absolutely. So yes, very good, very interesting fellow. Lives up a mountain in Wales, at peace with the world. made a great new record where
That's
he's,
right. It's actually decent. Is it worth investigating?
oh yeah, definitely, because it's almost like it's not like he's written his obituary, but it's a very, very sort of, here's a man again around 80, looking back at his life and knowing there's less ahead of him than there is behind him,
Mm.
and just sort of ruminating and looking at, the FAQs of life. He's looking like all of us of a certain age. We're not that old yet.
Mm.
You're getting a bit nearer to it, but
How dare you?
um, but just that sort of confusion of modern life, how suddenly we have been, the robots with which Kraftwerk and et al. Were, intimating back then, are all happening around us all the time. I've got chatbot on my screen at the moment. I've got all these things.
It
And
was that kind of AI pop, wasn't it?
yeah, uh,
Four decades early.
he boogied with a suitcase.
But one thing that I don't think you realised, as I certainly didn't realise at the time, was that yeah, he was a foretaste of the synth pop future to come. But he'd managed Rugulator.
Oh, I know.
Unbelievable. So he was Mr. Pub Rock for about a year
Well,
before he threw in his lot with, the electronic pop future.
and a lot of, like, I think it's his brother was a bass player who played in Rugulator, but there was a guy, John Lewis, who had done some sort of synth work, and he got that sound. Because there's other versions. If you listen out there on Spotify, you can hear there's a sort of R&B version of it that was out there from the year before, which only came to light later. He was trying these different ways with it. He had this lyric and this melody. And the R&B version, it's a bit like, I don't know, Q-Tips or something doing it. And it's like you wouldn't bat an eyelid if you heard it ever again. You know what I mean? It's just, it was, it's okay, but it was not in any way remarkable. But he knew there was something more, and he kept sort of working on it and pushing it to get that sound. And, it's that, like the greatest pop records, it's the marriage of sound and the content, that just when it works perfectly, that could be like, a garage band. I was just listening to The Fall this morning. You listen to Repetition by The Fall, it
Mm.
sounds appalling in sort of technical terms, but it's such a brilliant record because of.
I want. Could Robin Scott? Could he have a hit in 2025? The way things are set up, the way he sounds. I was just thinking about that because we're talking about 1979 artists: Gary Newman, Tubeway Army, Janet Kay, or whatever.
Who were all
There,
still
there is
around.
there is actually a group from 1979 that did have a #1 record many, many, many years later, and I always think of it as an example of to prove, yeah, you can do it decades after the event if you have the right song. Can you remember? Do you know who I'm talking about? Huge in '79, off the radar by 81, 82, and then suddenly they come back. I think it's '99 or 2000 with a huge, well, a #1 record. I can't think of any other example
Oh,
of a
not
huge.
Blondie.
Blondie, yeah,
Yeah,
With Maria.
you sort of knew the first time I heard Maria, I just thought that's the #1 record. I mean, it's just like,
Yeah, I mean that you've got good pop ears, and I mean maybe I don't have. I didn't think that was remotely achievable for them. I thought they'd had their moment in the sun. They were massive. They were
oh,
arguably the biggest band on the planet in '79, along with the Police, and
and then
nothing.
collapsed. Yeah, I mean that last album, The Hunter. I mean, it was just it. I believe the technical term is, and please get me wrong, all the musicians listening in, are like, but it stank. It was like, how can you have? But you were doing such great things, and then suddenly
Yeah,
it's not bad out. I mean, it's got because they were one of the. I always love the people that were in running to do the Bond theme, and you've got their version
right.
of Bond themes out there. And I think there's a song in there called "For Your Eyes Only," but they went wisely for Sheena instead. But
Well, she even did an album with Nile Rodgers, and that tanked. Everything she touched turned to gold, and then everything she touched
yeah,
failed to achieve anything like the former glories.
and she had that little bit with Deaf, Dumb and Blonde, and she did. I Want That Man, and
Yes.
French kissing in the USA.
Yeah.
But they were very much sort of rocky outcrops, if you will, from the main
Mm.
body of work. And I know, yeah, it was
But
bizarre.
if you could capture what they did with Maria, many artists on the comeback trail would have far more successful
But it
times
was,
of
but it
it.
was still at that point where the CD single was king, queen, whatever. It was out there, and they're heavily is pushing CD singles 1.99, 99p in the first week, 2-part CD singles, whatever, and it was pushed. They signed back to a major company. They hadn't done anything, and you could just hear that record. It just sort of had pop in a bottle. You could release that today and it wouldn't be anywhere in the chart because of the way streaming goes and how streaming is accredited. Now, obviously, one of the things that does happen from time to time, and this happened to Robin Scott, was TikTok. The phrase "it blew up on TikTok."
Did he have a bit of a running up that hill moment? Did he?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, Running Up That Hill is a version of where the planets align, and you do get a record that was never number one at the time, becoming it. But yeah, no, I think pop music has become a very sort of established meme that people like doing, and is being reinterpreted by various people in the past few years, and he's absolutely delighted because it's he's down with the kids again, and a song like that just doesn't age.
Yeah, we're talking about 1979 briefly here. I'll tell you who else had a good 1979. Record Collector. It was launched in September that year, and a sign of a magazine in its pomp in 2025 is Record Collector. Why do I say so? Because we've got Dave Gilmour on the cover, and we've got another artist. Could easily have been an alternative cover, and in fact is the cover of another magazine in the shops as we speak. Classic Pop. They put on the cover Bryan Adams. We got an embarrassment of riches, as they used to call it. We've got so many people that could have made the cover. We've had to put him top left, going across the top. And a great interview by Joel McIver with Mr. Adams, talking about he's not somebody that I don't get the feeling that you see Bryan Adams much in magazines. So it's quite nice to have a sit down, up close and personal encounter with him that delves into his life and times, as we have with Mr. Gilmour.
I think Joel's done a lovely job with that. It's a very informal interview, and Joel knows his onions, and I think Bryan Adams warms to that.
There's a bit of bristliness, which is nice. You always like to get a bit of bristle.
But I think the thing is, as I said before, how many times has Bryan Adams been interviewed? And it's like, what do you bring to the table differently? And it's the relationship between pop star and interviewer, and all of that sort of thing is brought to bear in there. And he's a fascinating character, I think, for someone that sold so many records and has quite a few nice bits and pieces of collectibles there. He's quite underrated. I think he never quite fitted in with the hard rock crowd.
Well, you always get the sense that I think people maybe you've said this sometimes, but he's a bit of a Primark boss, isn't he? And he's struggled to come out of that critically, commercially. He's an untouchable force. He's huge, but he's never been one of those artists that have appeared in the critics' top 20 albums of all time lists.
No, and I think that's simply because he's not. He's too pop for metal. He's too metal for pop. He's not cool enough to be post-punk. He's not. He's But by heavens, he's popular. I mean, and also he wrote that song, that he did with Mel C, which I think is one of the greatest.
That was great. That I like that one. Ever. Really good.
I mean, that was
a co-write, was it?
I think it was. Yeah, I must double check. It could have been written by Diane Warren or something. It's not my specialist subject, but I mean, I think he did write it, and I just think, wow, what a record. In fact, I saw that record on the same Top of the Pops. I worked in Virgin Crew when I was at university. When I went back to I was in my 30s. So, I think I've said this every time I speak. But there was someone at Virgin Crew, Alison, who was obsessed with Top of the Pops. And she'd never been and wanted to go. So we had a Virgin Crew outing down to Edgware, Elstree.
Elstree, my manor. My stomping ground where I grew up.
So where EastEnders is recorded and all of that when Top of the Pops was there. So we all went down and changed at Watford Junction. I just remember the ride taking forever. And saw Top of the Pops. And in that Top of the Pops, Bryan Adams and Mel C were doing Since You've Gone. And then at the end they said, right, there's one other thing. This isn't going to be in this episode. It's going to be in a couple of episodes. And Blondie came on and did Maria. And it was, tremendously exciting. And I think out there somewhere that Juliet Roberts doing Bad Boys, Bad Girls. You can see me in the background doing a dance. But even then I was old. And did you ever go to Top of the Pops?
I did a few times. Yeah, I'm trying to remember who I went
They-
there with. Probably somebody like Electribe 101. I'm trying to think,
yeah,
but
you say that because you're so cool, Paul.
I really am. Bill Haley
But
was
I
also in
think
the
they
issue.
corralled the audience around. They brought, all the cool kids to the front, and like a fat middle-aged bloke was sort of pushed to the back. But then, they obviously needed me because I knew the dance to Bad Girls by because it was Donna Summer cover. Juliet Roberts, of course, from Working Week. Anyway, moving on. Over to you.
Yeah, Angela should probably do some nipping and tucking there. But I was just going to say we've also got in this issue a chap who doesn't get written about much in the music monthlies, but would have been 100 this year. Bill Haley, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Which it seems a weird thing to be doing to rehabilitate or reinvestigate why Bill Haley seems to have fallen off the critical radar, but such is the case. Doesn't get mentioned much, does he, around these parts? And worth
No,
reasserting what he achieved all those
very much
decades
so.
ago.
Lest we forget, really. I mean, he wasn't the first. He was older and podgy and all of those things. But in terms of coming over here and doing what he did,
He's the Sugar Hill
and
Gang
doing,
of rock and roll, isn't he? He wasn't actually the first, but he gets trotted out as somebody that was there early on, but probably
well, and
undeservedly.
but I think that thing that because he coincided with the birth of the teenager TM, and you had Blackboard Jungle, which
Yeah.
the Blackboard film that Rock Around the Clock was in, and I'm not quite sure why there was the obsession of slashing cinema seats. I mean, I don't know what a cinema seat had ever done to them, but
Yeah.
all that thing of cinema seats being ripped up, and then he came, and when the film came out, and then he came over. I mean, it was brilliant, and I think Jack captures that feeling well. And then the feeling that he was a bit of a sort of square peg for years after, because he was never revered in the way that the Killer was, or Chuck Berry, or obviously Elvis.
Mm.
And obviously Buddy died young, but then had the whole phenomenon sort of posthumously, and Bill sort of looked on.
Well, not anymore, because now he's got his second moment in the critical sun, and he's
Because we
certainly
got a
going
feature in
to.
and
um,
it's brilliant.
I should mention we've also got a big piece on the Cardiacs, who should be totally up my alley, because they every time they get written about, they get mentioned alongside 10cc and XTC, all the C
Yeah,
bands,
yeah, yeah.
Quirky, Jerky. I don't quite understand them, but the people that adore them really do so, unreservedly. And
Properly.
even though their main man Tim Smith passed away several years ago, they still seem to have a following and a sense of kind of cult herodom about them. Are you a Cardiac man?
No, I'm not. And they're always like, there's certain groups which are grey areas, and I will, the great thing with streaming today or YouTube or whatever is you can dip in and listen. Who was a Cardiacs man was Dear Jack Kane, who used to work for Record Collector, was a previous editor of the Rare Record Price Guide. 20 years gone now, unbelievably, the poor lad. But he was obsessed with them. And I think you get that thing, it's a bit like Fall fans or whatever, that if you're outside of that and you hit it, you think, oh, I'm not sure about that one.
Well, I
And
guess you were saying that. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm kind of tending to do that today. I don't do it. I'm not doing it deliberately.
please
So
do.
I'm
Got
so
to get in there.
gripped by this conversation. I want to join in at every turn. But I'm wondering if one of those groups who deserve contention alongside the sort of the cult greats would be Saint
Yeah.
Etienne, who have decided to call it quits after it turns out it's about 25, 30 years,
Oh,
incredibly.
yeah.
But they seem to be one of those groups that would put out Christmas releases and rarity. They accrued a whole bunch of kind of rarities and collectibles, and they were designed to be enjoyed on that level.
Oh, yeah.
Are they a future Cardiacs? Do you think Saint Etienne will they now, especially now they've
No, I think
decided to call it a day? Are they going to? Is that part of their reputation going to increase the value of their critical stock and the worth of their records?
both things with Saint Etienne are always there because they are so. I mean, if they were like the first sort of postmodernist time bomb, if you like, coming through, because of Bob Stanley, record collector, contributor, and Pete Wiggs, love and knowledge of music. I mean, absolute forensic knowledge, plus the fact that Bob was a journalist and you had that. So all those references were inbuilt from day one. It's almost like they were Easter eggs, as they call them, in virtually everything they were doing. And I remember at our price, when I was working at our price, which I may have mentioned before, but like early 90s, when they were in their ascendancy, they were absolutely adored. They were like a sort of record shop workers band. And the pictures, they were, I could never move. There was always a picture of Sarah Cracknell somewhere.
Well,
And it was like the boy.
they did briefly call it record shop pop. I think Simon Reynolds coined the term record shop or record collector rock. Primal Scream, Bob Stanley, people whose record collections were so vast that their records were almost all about records, weren't they, rather than lived experience. So it could have been taken negatively, but it could also be a positive. And
But I think their intelligence, the fact they were doing Christmas records like the Beatles had done, like and not unashamedly, they were coming out and they were doing things like that and covering Driving Home for Christmas and stuff. It was like the one thing with Bob is he embraces everything. There's things he doesn't like, obviously, but it's there. And I think record shop people, and I think all the critics. I don't know if I know of a critic that doesn't like them. I know of two, but
one of a few examples of music journalists making it big in the world. So big, in fact, I think at one point they knocked Michael Jackson off the top of I think it was the Billboard dance chart. Bob was touting that as a great, and it was a brilliant thing to have done. They were briefly big in America, and certainly in kind of underground club land. But a great group, and one of the last purveyors of great B-sides or other tracks on CD singles.
The whole thing, this and part of the Heavenly thing and making their films and the soundtrack and all that, it was all part of a piece. And I think the retirement thing is a great thing as well, because it's like, okay, fair dues, let's go. And you sort of know, or you feel that their retirement, is going to be a real thing. They're not going to come back and play the O2 in 20 years' time or something. Although
one of those bands who like REM announce it and make a play of the split or the departure, which is it's a nice way to do it. I mean, they probably would have done it anyway, but to do it deliberately in the way in the manner of Eliza Minnelli, for example, or I think Laura Nyro used to do it.
Yeah, Frank Sinatra was well known for it, but I mean, I think. Who called their tour the first farewell tour? There was something, there's that thing. I think there's that acknowledgement.
Well, Hell Freezes Over, the Eagles, where they've made a thing out of the decision to call it quits.
It says that never thing, but I really feel REM will at some point, because they played on stage, didn't they, in Athens a few months ago?
Yes.
And again, there was another group. We talk about Blondie, where their critical stock from being, the darlings. When I worked at Art Price, they were every assistant manager liked them. It was that strange. It was always a sort of guy in a check shirt who was sort of like a bit cool and that, like Nick Drake before everyone else. Always like those first 3 REM albums, and it was like, no, you can't hear him singing. What's he saying? I can't hear. And then, Automatic for the People is one of those brilliant records where. Everyone was aligned. It was almost like, mass consumption and critical swell. I get the sense you probably didn't like it.
I do like Murmur, and that's where I kind of bow out, to be honest.
Funnier early.
The only funny one.
But then, they couldn't get arrested after, in the 21st century, those, like, I can't even remember the names of the last albums, because I gave up.
Each one was touted as the best since. And you always know that the game's up when I think they always used to say it was the best since, probably Automatic, maybe more.
But then I think if they come back, you could just see 10 Nights at the O2 probably.
They would now, because in the Kingdom of the Blind, the One-Eyed Man is King. There are no rock bands, so I think they do extraordinarily well. I mean, there's U2. They kind of toyed a little bit with a comeback, or they put out a release last year. Not much was made of it, apart from an excellent record collector front cover and an exclusive interview with Bono, Ed, and the boys. Who else?
Speaking of, sorry.
Oh, go on, you go.
Oh no, I just want to say, speaking of U2, was John Peel's auction recently at Amiga, and I was absolutely enthralled. I had it live on screen all day. I mean, I've been up there to see them live, but live on screen, I was working away, and the U2 3 EP, the first 12-inch pressing of it, where there was only 1,000, and it was only available in Ireland, and it was sent. It's got a handwritten note to Kid Jensen in there from Bono, and it ended up in Peel's collection. You imagine Kid Jensen going, hey, John, what's this? I'll have that. Impressions and everything. Anyway, it went. How much do you think it went for?
2,000.
That's the price it is in Record Collector, Rare Record Price Guide, which is about right. I said there was a Peel tax on everything. It went for £10,000.
Wow.
For a
And
3-track.
Why the 8,000 over the RRPG asking price?
Well, because it's an extremely sought after record. There are only 1,000 of them printed at this point. And the great thing is it's a 12-inch. It's one of those 12 inches that said at the time, the content's the same as the 7-inch sticker on it, but it's a CBS house bag. So it's like something you'd have bought you wouldn't have bought D-Train because they came out on Epic over here. But a CBS Disco 12-inch bag with a big CBS at the bottom and a die-cut hole and everything. And just to see that, obviously they were CBS in Ireland for the first releases, but just seems so alien. So it's very, very well sought after. It's one of those absolute, holy grails of their collecting thing. And I think it's been reissued now about 4 or 5 times afterwards. But this one, I think that provenance, this was the record. It was like when the Joy Division stuff was said, these were the records that Peel held in his hands and filed in his collection and annotated. He had stickers on the back of them saying, track 1, side 1, or whatever for things. So
I remember when U2 were kind of an obscure thing that they were coming out of the shadow, out of Joy Division shadows really, and a track called Unpacked Dub on a Free Enemy. It's the second Enemy cassette, not I think it might, not the first one with it had Orange Juice and
it was Dancing Master. I think the second one
was it Dancing Master. I think it was that one actually. I wonder what were those Enemy tapes. I tend to put you on the spot and do this, but would they be worth money? Those Enemy tapes that Roy Carr put together?
Not. I mean, I think with all those things, it's like if you want them, you'll buy them. It's really obvious. I think it's a very good question, Paul. And I'll look, but I've never really seen any value attached to them. 5 or 10 or whatever, because there were so many. When you think of Enemy's run at that time, print run, it was tens of thousands.
It would have been, probably would have been early, maybe even 100,000.
Yeah, maybe. But brilliant, and you're absolutely right. When U2 came out, I mean, I saw them unbilled supporting Talking Heads. They were third on the bill, and I thought they were bloody awful. And I remember saying to my mate, "Christ, that bloke reckons himself, doesn't he?" Because he was doing. I mean, the amazing thing was he was doing all that then. Well, what we know and love.
Like the world owed him. Yeah. That's
6 years later, he did the same thing at Live Aid and became a global phenomenon,
Yes.
And then Rattle and Hum is all him doing that. But he was doing that at the Electric Ballroom when people were waiting for Talking Heads and OMD. And he came out and he was, I'm here now and all that. You can see why he was going to get signed, because that sort of belief.
Very occasionally, as a music journalist, you do get a band that will do that for you. So what I mean is, you will turn up for an interview, and they'll say, "I hope you don't mind, but we're going to do a couple of songs," and that did happen and it happened most memorably with Billy Mackenzie of the Associates. I went round to his place in West London to interview him, and he just said, "Oh, that's why you're here," and he launched into a couple of songs unreleased for my own delectation and delight. And it was incredible, because a couple of months later he took his own life, and there were no signs of it then at all. But an amazing thing to look back on. Yeah. If you were expecting me to say that Bono, I had a private audience with Bono, it wasn't him at all. But the Billy Mackenzie thing was very, very memorable. We should actually mention, because we were talking last month about having to redo the front cover of the magazine, and in fact a lot of the content, because of the deaths of Brian Wilson and Sly Stone. We almost did the same this month, but we thought better of it, because another incredible artist, musician, giant name in the firmament, Ozzy Osbourne, passed away. There you go. So I should say that if you're expecting an Aussie tribute, yeah, you will be getting a pretty chunky one in the next issue of Record Collector. Aussie
I mean,
by
I
John
think
Tucker.
when Brian and Sly went, we were about a week and a half out, weren't we, from the
Yeah,
press day? I mean,
we had
this
the
came
time.
through on the eve of press day, and it was a bit like, how do we? It was too late to change it, certainly with the Gilmour thing, and it was like, well, do we give over or do we wait and do it as
I'll
well
be
as we're
honest with
doing it?
you. I'll be honest with the listeners as well. I mean, I did toy with the idea of putting a little splash on the cover saying, hold the front page, because I did decide to do my editor's letter based on a 2014 interview I think I did with, or 2013 interview I did with Black Sabbath, and a lot of Ozzy
Yeah,
Osbourne quotes were in there. So I put that into the editor's letter. I thought, well, maybe we
that's
should
right.
mention, so at least acknowledge that we are able to do that. But in the end, I thought
Yeah,
better of it. I thought it was a bit cheap, and we'd be cheating the readers out of something more substantial, which will be coming in the next issue. As will
definitely,
be
and
a Daryl Easlea front cover. Another Daryl Easley. It's all it's
well,
total domination. You are the Bono of Record Collector, but you've got
well,
the top 200 UK collectibles cover story in the
yeah,
next issue.
very excited about it. I mean, it's absolute team effort. I wanted to get our key sort of magazine Discogs team involved. So we got the wonderful Lois Wilson, Joe Geesin, long serving. He's been doing it for nearly 30 years. John Coleman, Lawrence Kane Honeysett, the wonderful fellow. And then one of our guest sort of discographers, Joel McIver, who comes in and out of that. They don't all contribute to the big book. John Coleman does, Joe Geesin does, and Lawrence does on reggae. But I thought what would be really good is to get their take on these 200s. And I'm sort of topping and tailing and going pull out quotes and doing different bits. So that's all coming into me at the moment, and we will talk about it next time. But tremendously exciting, and just very exciting of how the book. Hold on, I always like to show it once in the thing. The book, and if you look below, give us a like, of course, give us a subscribe, and possibly even consider purchasing that. It's still not too late for Christmas coming up, because it is now August, unbelievably.
It is. It's going to be a bumper issue, 164 pager, which is 32 more pages than you normally get, which will accommodate the top 200. Also, the Ozzy Osbourne tribute. There's a
Yep,
big piece on Gruff Reese of Super Furry Animals. Chess Records gets a look at.
yep,
Spandau
yep.
Ballet get
Yes,
seriously rehabilitated by the gentleman who's written a book about krautrock, David Stubbs. So he's to be trusted. Jeffrey Lewis, we take a look at the US indie
yep.
artist. Naughty's Vinyl and its increased value of late gets
It's hard to
a
beat.
forensic scrutiny of John Earls, and we interview one half of Peter and Gordon, the Peter half, Peter Asher, brother of
Well,
Jane, and
nice fellow.
you've worked with him.
I've worked with him. Yeah, we
Ah.
lovely man. Where's his history likely? Or certainly when I was working with him, he's
He's
not
done an
like.
incredible career. I mean, not only was he mid-60s man, and it arguably takes Paul McCartney into the sort of upper class ambit or artistic milieu that he was craving, but
Yep,
he's then become 70s man and works with all of the West Coast troubadours, the singer-songwriters, the Linda Ronstadts.
yep.
Amazing. And then carries on to this day. I think he's recently produced the Barbra Streisand album, the one with Paul McCartney on. He's
Yeah. No,
still doing it at the age of 81.
I mean, I think there's that thing where you get those real sort of music industry career men and
Mm.
women, who just, Joe Boyd's another one. He's still out. He did a wonderful Nick Drake box set that's just come out. He's been involved with that.
Clive
Music
Davis,
is what people.
is he still around?
What, Joe Boyd, Clive
No, Clive.
Davis? Yeah, he's still
Yeah.
around. I think he's in retirement now.
Right, okay. But you're right. There are a few that are lifers like us. We're going to be doing it till we drop, aren't we? They're going to have to cart us out in a truck. Don't have to be a truck. It can be
I'll still
something a
be
lot
writing
smaller.
a full sleeve note. Now, something I wanted to say to you, dear, about the next magazine. It's lovely. Buy it. Thank you for listening and watching us on Needlepoint. We really appreciate it. Love the comments. Please keep giving us feedback
Yeah,
and
we're
things.
getting quite a few listeners now and downloaders. It's
I know.
very heartening. Yeah, in the next issue we've got apart from all the features and all the in-depth stuff, we've got reviews as well, including of Oasis live, the Final Judgment. And Funkadelic get looked at. David Bowie. There's new stuff or new releases from the Vaults by Terry Hall. It's going to be a great issue. Can you remember what it was you were
What
about
about
to
the
say?
issue? No, but I will say in our issue we are talking about today, we'll be talking a bit further lens about that in our next podcast. But in this issue, what lovely Dr. Feelgood taking the lead in the album reviews there, and my third interview, it's like my 1979 triptych of Hitmate
Good. Well pronounced.
was John B. Sparks, aka Sparko,
Sparko.
of the Feelgoods, of course, had their only top 10 hit in 1979 in the early days
Back in the night.
with a
No.
late 1978 number that was released, I think, in about December the 29th, 78, who breezed into the top 10 in early 79. So it was Milk and Alcohol.
Oh, Milk and Alcohol.
So you got Milk and Alcohol. So if I look at my 1979 issue, Milk and Alcohol there, although we're talking about the Wilco albums before, and then Pop Music in May, June, and then Another Brick in the Wall, November, December. So
There
I've
you
got
have
the whole.
Well, the whole gallimuffery, you talk about a spread of artists. You got Pop Music, proto synth pop. You've got pre-punk, proto garage R&B, Dr. Feelgood, and then you've got Pink Floyd, latter day prog.
Stately and Glacial. Stately and Glacial. They were a great garage duo, weren't they? Had that number out around the time of Luck and Me. Stately and Glacial. I wish I hadn't said that. Anyway, I think
we should at this point we tend to mention the other things that are available from our ambit from the world of record collector. The book of zines, for example. What have we got coming out?
We mentioned the marvelous Gary Newman one that's out
Gary
right
Newman
now.
one's coming, yeah. Being worked on is a 70s.
And we've still got our and we've got that fabulous Jason Draper production of the David Bowie. His first years.
In fact, I'm looking forward to reading Jason Draper. Jason Draper's he's actually reviewed the reissue of More Songs About Buildings Than Food, the second Talking Heads album. I'm looking forward to reading that because that's probably my secret favourite of Talking Heads.
Oh, it's my favourite. Well, yeah, no, he's my favourite.
I mean, I love it. I think we sort of brushed on this last conversation we had, but I think Talking Heads. I'll leave this with you. This one to ponder out there in the listenership of in record collector land. But who is the group do you think that had the greatest 4-album run in history? I would. Many people would say the Beatles, but I'd say Talking Heads. Those first 4 Talking Heads albums, astonishing. The leaps. And just what they achieved in 3 short years. Debbie comes out in 77, remaining like 80. It's 4 years, but incredible.
Didn't we do this last time?
Did we do? Was it? No, didn't we say who had the longest run? We asked the question who had the longest run, and I said people like Neil Young, the whole of the 70s, Costello, 77 to 86. Right. But I said a 4-album, just a discrete 4-album package.
Yeah, no, I think Talking Heads is pretty much there. Although I'd make a case for the first 4 Roxy.
First 4 Roxy, okay.
You know,
many people would say that they went off the cliff after Stranded, wouldn't they?
No.
Who's the one after Stranded?
Country Life, good lord.
Country Life, yeah.
It has its proponents. We mentioned Triptych. There's a song on there called Triptych. No, I actually think that's probably, to me, that's where they've all sort of relaxed a bit into being themselves. And Eddie Jobson's fully in. But I would say 4 there. But
okay. You can have that.
Come back to Stevie.
And I'm certainly not going to be mentioning 10cc and the journey from 10cc to sheet music to original soundtrack to How Dare You. Far be it from me. But nevertheless, if you were to draw me into that argument, I would definitely assert their contribution to the pop pantheon with their quartet of releases between 73 and 76. Stevie Wonder, of course.
You know, I would make a case for the full 90 to 93 with Extricate, Shift Work, Code Selfish, and Infotainment Scan.
Very good.
But also, you can make it for
you can't do it for Dexys because they do go off a cliff after their 3rd one, don't they?
I mean, but the 3.
The 3 were. Yeah, 3. If you're going to do a 3-album run, I mean, they'd be up there, wouldn't they? Dexys.
And I'll tell you, I've just in the next issue, you'll read my review of Kevin's book.
I I've just bought it. Don't
Oh,
no
have you?
spoiler alert, because I've taken it. I'm taking it on holiday because I'm going after this chat, Daryl. As you know, I'm going on holiday for 2 weeks, and I've made my very first music biz purchase because I get everything free.
Oh,
I don't want to. I'm not trying to lord it over anybody because you can see from my pay packet that I'm not mixing with deity. But I actually bought that book. I had such good things about
yeah.
it. Chris
No,
Roberts. Somebody said it was the best. I don't know, maybe it's you that said it was the best rock confessional since Ian Hunter's
it's
Diary
in
of a
terms
Rock
of
and Roll.
in terms of confessional. It's sometimes like, actually, Kev, enough already. Can you tell me about who played the flute on
Right, yeah.
Till I Believe in My Soul? If you want, it's always if you want a book on Dexys, don't read this. If you want a book on Kevin Rowland, oh my goodness, it is
Really
amazing.
excellent.
The
Wow.
richness of detail, the honesty. I mean, the honesty to the point of, I'm not sure if I need to know that.
Yeah, too much information.
Well, but it's Kevin. If it was anyone else, you'd think, oh no, but it's just interwoven and is, well, Proustian. It's positively Proustian, dear. But when he's describing things like records in the day, or going to see a film, or hearing this, or going on a bus, or being beaten up, or doing something at the school, or the petty crime he was involved in, you're there. It's just like you're watching, that Brighton Rock, something like that. It's
He names names, does he? Because I live quite near where he grew up in Harrow. On the train from New Street to Euston and out to Harrow again, it has a particular resonance.
Sorry.
So I'm looking forward to seeing actual street names and people.
Oh yeah, no, and it's brilliant because he's got this thing about how he has to become a Cockney, because he was Irish and then went to Wolverhampton and had to become a black country, and then suddenly he comes down, and there's a thing you'll hear. And actually, I do recommend listening to it as an audiobook, because to hear him read it,
the voice,
it's like all you need is a sort of saxophone playing in the background or a bit of piano. Everything sounds like a Dexys monologue. And when he describes when he went to school in Harrow from coming down from Wolverhampton, I mean, this isn't giving the game away, one of many brilliant things in it. But evidently he had to, hello, I'm Kevin Rowland and I'm from, I'm your new boy. And virtually everyone then for the playground for like a year after kept coming and going, hello, I'm Kevin Rowland. So he developed this content. And the great thing with his audiobook, he does all the voices.
Right.
He does all
the
voices.
Really?
And like when he sings Danny Boy, he sings it as his father's grave. He sings it, and it's just like, oh my God.
Wow.
So, but the great thing is, it's a double pleasure because you read it and then you listen to it, and I mean, it's a bit like reading the book and then seeing the film or whatever. So you'll enjoy it. I mean, and there's bits you go, oh, okay.
Very much looking forward to it, and very much looking forward to doing this again in 4 weeks' time. I thought that was the most fun I've ever had without laughing.
Summer sojourns, and we shall return. So, as always, thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to click away and tell us if you like us, if you hate us, if you love us, subscribe us, tell your friends, all the platforms.
Yeah, and if you have any suggestions for future content, anybody you'd like to hear, or any things you'd like to hear discussed on this on Needlepoint, then it'll be much appreciated. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks for listening, most importantly, and look forward to speaking to you and with you in a few weeks' time. Yeah, sorry, Daryl. Your name
Well,
your name is Daryl Easlea, and it's writ large over the whole of the magazine, so there'll be no confusion as to who you are.
Paul Lester, and you remain our collective hero. And this has been Needlepoint.
Thank you.
Wow.
Needlepoint, the Record Collector podcast with Paul Lester and Daryl Easlea.